Hey, everybody, welcome to Perpetual Motion, a podcast focused on lifestyle, self-care, personal empowerment, and positive relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Mo, best-selling author, award-winning podcast host, keynote speaker, and speaker coach. Every episode, I talk to amazing thought leaders from around the globe who educate us, me and you, with tools and strategies to help us grow as leaders in our homes, communities, and workplaces. And we have fun doing it. So please stick around. And if you're new to Perpetual Motion or a returning visitor, let's make this official. Hit that subscribe button and you'll be notified weekly when new episodes post. I've got an awesome guest today, all the way from Virginia. His name is Coach Keegan Schaefer, and this man is on a heck of a mission. He wants to impact 1 million lives by helping you create your best self. Why? Because if you are not at your best, how will you utilize your unique abilities and strengths in order to impact others and change the world? I'm for it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Welcome, Coach Keeg. How are you?
Thank you so much, Dr. Mo. I'm amazing. I am thrilled to be here with you today.
All right. Let's get into it then. Let's start with, you've got a phenomenal background, and your website is dope. That video of you, we'll drop that in the show notes so people can see a good example of a website too. You're setting lots of good examples and being a role model in so many ways. But first, I want to hear a little bit about your background and what life was like before you were known as Coach Keeg.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, first and foremost, thank you so much for your time today. I'm excited to be here with you. A little on the background, I found that my upbringing was different than my peers. I won't get into all the details, but just some bullet points that occurred. Everything from abandonment from parents, heavy abuse, physically, mentally, emotionally, being molested as a child, being diagnosed with ADHD at age 4, having a speech impediment, being suicidal, facing addiction, homelessness. All of this happened before the age of 18. So going through those experiences, I realized that I was playing a victim mindset. I was putting all this power into other people, whether that was a stepfather or my mom or a society or school or whatever it was, and I wasn't taking ownership.
Understood. That's difficult. Wow, you've overcome quite a few very difficult challenges and circumstances, and you could very much go into a victim woe is me mentality, as so many people do. And those, I know all of those things have to be painful. Some I've experienced, many not, but I've had my own, history with dealing with challenges. But you say we can use pain to our advantage. How so?
Absolutely. Great question. So just shared the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, leveraging that pain. You got to think of it like this. All humans, they either avoid pain or they seek pleasure. That's the motive of what we do. So, using that pain can help you to get a tremendous amount of results.
Mm-hmm.
So again, using those things that were personal experiences to me, I made it my life's work to turn all of it around. And that came down to an extreme amount of personal development, whether that was courses, webinars, having my own coaches, going through reading a tremendous amount of books, all of these things to find a system, a formula, an equation that people could easily just tap into. Right. And so that is to say that if you had to focus on these particular areas, you can leverage those painful experiences because you don't ever want to live like that again. You know what it's like to go through those hardships. And for me, I didn't want to see other people go through those things either.
Right. What about, and I totally agree with what you're saying, that you can use that to motivate you as fuel, but some people, they get very bitter and their motivation is to be vindictive, even though they're not necessarily doing mean things, they're driven by the idea of, I'm going to show you.
Right.
How do you flip that to being a more positive source of inspiration or motivation?
Well, I'd ask this question, Dr. Mo. what is the intent for any person? I would venture to say that most people on earth, they're either seeking some form of self-mastery or fulfillment by some means, whatever that definition is for anybody, right?
Mhm.
And so in order to get to that point, we cannot be self-centered. There are parameters that we do need to be selfish in. For example, your morning routine. You and I both know that if I don't have my head properly ready for the day, I cannot fill other people's cups to the best of my ability. So
Right.
in those tasks, which would include personal development, health, and spirituality, when I can hyper focus on those areas selfishly to make myself better before the world, children, or business need me, then I am prepared. So then you take that and you grow into these other elements. So to answer your question, to shift from that selfish perspective, you've got to find a way to leverage your gifts, your skills to serve other people. And
Yes.
so when you can start by helping others to get to a particular point, it's almost a selfish way, because we know that by serving other people, it's going to come full circle back to us, but we can't be directly focused on ourselves all the time.
Right, right. Absolutely. I totally believe in that. Passing it forward, serving forward, the Great Commission, however it comes about, there's so much fulfillment and there's a high you're not going to get from anything else, not lasting and not without a hangover. It's a
Right.
beautiful, beautiful high. Jumping back into your personal story, which is so fascinating, and how you came to these. We're going to talk later about your pillars of fulfillment through purpose. You were arrested at age 7. What happened and how does that play into the big picture?
So, we can leverage experiences, right? And here's the story. I was with my mom. We went into a Walmart, and at this time, we did not have money. I mean, there would be meals that we would miss for days.
Mm.
We were walking down this aisle, and I saw this toy section, and there was this little tiger figurine. And I saw it, and I thought it was the coolest thing. I can still remember the details of this little tiger. And I grabbed it and I put it in my pocket. Even though I know I was not supposed to do that, I
Right.
did. My mom didn't see it. She didn't catch it. We get home and I pull this little tiger out. I'm playing with this tiger. And she goes, "Where did you get that?" And she found out, of course, that I'd stolen it from Walmart.
Right.
And so we had a family friend that was a police officer. She called him, told him to come over, told him what happened. And this man literally put cuffs on me behind the back, put me in the back of the police car, and drove me around the neighborhood and was threatening me. He was saying,
Wow.
"Is this really where you want to be when you grow up?" And so, again, that was an experience that I held true to me. Why? Because the pain was so high of what I would receive if I were to steal in the future. Right. And so,
Mhm.
again, this kind of comes back to this whole concept of how can we leverage experiences, good or bad. And this is an interesting topic in and of itself, because, as humans, we live in two domains. We live in natural law, which is nature, which there is no good and bad. It doesn't exist. It just is. And then there's human domain, which is very emotional, and we create this good and bad. So we live in both parallels.
Mhm.
But again, taking that concept, we can take certain experiences that we deem good or bad in the human domain and leverage those to get better results long term. So again, this was an experience that stuck with me forever. I was arrested for this little, 50-cent tiger figurine, but the long-term effect was that I wouldn't steal because of that. And so we can do a lot of things to leverage this in our own heads to get these results.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a great story, and kudos to your mom. Some people would look at that and think that was kind of harsh, but I'd much rather learn the lesson at 7 than at 17 or 27, which is unfortunately what happens when there are not consequences. It's funny, I had forgotten this, but something similar happened to me. They didn't have Walmart when I was a kid. It was at a Kmart, I think, or somewhere. They had this Brock's candy, and you're too young to remember this, but they used to just, it was ridiculous, Coach Keeg. They just had big bins of candy, little individual candy you could buy just sitting out right at a child's eye level, and same thing. I'm hungry. Mama's dragging me around all these stores. So I took a couple of pieces of candy, and perhaps they were, just treats for me being good. I don't know, but wow, my mom found out while we were still in the store, because at least you waited till you got home. I just started eating the candy in the store. And she turned around and she's like, where did that come from? And I got a pocket full at this point. And she took me to the manager, made me apologize, made me give the candy back. She paid for what I'd eaten, and then talked a lot about how what I did impacted our entire family. And you don't make those connections as a kid.
Sure.
That's reflecting on your whole family. And I tell you what, I didn't steal another thing. I never forgot that. And when I had my own business, I had a GNC at one point. It also made me compassionate. Obviously, you don't want, you got to watch your inventory, but at the same
Right.
time, particularly young people, to think about, they're just not thinking, this
Right.
is what I want. It's immediate gratification. So many lessons there. Let's jump to another topic. Neuro-associative conditioning, NAC. What is it, and how can we implement it today to our advantage?
So this is a great question. So you may or may not be familiar with Pavlov. This is Pavlovian theory. And essentially, he did a study years ago, Russian psychologist. He did a study where he essentially took dogs, and every time he would feed the dogs, he would ring a bell. And so when we think about the reticular activating system, this is a 2.5-inch strand that's in the back of our neck. This process is sight, sound, touch, right? So here's a good example. You probably see this all the time, but if you are thinking about buying a red car, then you go out into public and you're always seeing a red car, right? That's the RAC. Same thing is true with opportunity, by the way. If you're always looking for wins, if you're always looking for opportunity, you're programming yourself, you're conditioning yourself to go out and seek that in the world. So Pavlov did this with dogs through auditory, of course, bell, food. What he realized was when there was no food in front of the dogs, if he rung the bell, they would still start to salivate. Right? Because they'd been conditioned that they were seeking, or they were being rewarded with food.
Right.
And so a very quick implementable way that everybody can use this is a rubber band. You can put a rubber band on your wrist, and anytime you have a thought that does not serve you, you snap that rubber band. What are we doing? We are conditioning ourselves neurologically to avoid that pattern or habit. And so again, that's a very, very quick way. And it works, by the way. You can do this starting right now. You put a rubber band on your wrist. You can do this for 30 days and it'll change your life. In fact, I actually just had these made. This is a similar aspect, right? Because we said sight, sound, and touch. Of course, the rubber band snapping it, that's a kinesthetic. That is a touch. But I had these made years ago. I did a podcast and we got huge demands for them. It's very simple. It just says, does this serve me? So that would be an example of
that's a silicone band, because this will be audio. So I want to describe what you're showing me.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, this is like the Live Strong bracelet, essentially. But instead of saying Live Strong on it, it says, does this serve me? And that is a visual trigger to condition you consistently. So again, that's kind of the short and sweet of it. NAC is being able to leverage sight, sound, touch conditioning to create the right patterns in your life.
Absolutely. And we don't think about the Pavlovian response in that way, or Freudian, but we absolutely can recondition ourselves. It doesn't always have to be an external counselor or anyone else. And even within your mind, changing your mindset, because I get attacked, when you're out in the public, you have so many people saying things, and you tend to focus on those instead of 99 positive things you see. You see that one criticism, whether it's deserved or not. And so I have to mentally affirm myself and say good things to myself. And that's my way of reconditioning me and thinking about I'm making a positive impact. And really, as we both know, Coach Keeg, if you're doing anything, somebody's going to have a problem with it. So if nobody's criticizing you, you're probably not doing anything. That's why.
No, that's so true. And to really tap into that, some people have polarized this to the wrong spectrum, meaning that they think that, hey, the way that I get notoriety and authenticity is to go out into the public and find haters, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about being authentic and genuine to your values. And when you do this, there are always going to be people that disagree with you. That's how you know you're on the right path, because when you speak from the heart, The
Right.
right people are going to find you and the wrong people are going to disagree with you. Wrong in terms of it. This is based on our values, of course. So right and wrong, again,
Right.
is a human construct. But you alluded to another point there, and that is fear, right? And so we all have fear. I personally have boiled this down into 6 human fears. And this is a really powerful way to shift, again, to your point, Dr. Mo, that perspective. Because when we look at a fear, for example, we might have a reaction to something, to what somebody said or what somebody did or an environment or whatever that is. And we might just brush it off. But what we have to realize is that we have reinforced patterns or habits based on our emotional interpretations, typically that occur from childhood, right? And then we take that into life. So when we think about the fear itself, this is a way to create a funnel. You look at the funnel, you say, what fear does this fall into? And then when you actually distinguish that fear, you can say, okay, what's the memory that contributes to this fear? And then when you get to the memory, then you gain power over it. And there's a ton of different exercises and stuff once you get to that point to rewire or restructure those patterns.
Right. But it starts with recognizing it and taking initiative and not just wallowing in it. I like what you just said. I want to circle back to, you talked about pleasure and desire, pleasure and pain. How do we differentiate short-term versus long-term pleasure and desire?
It's a great question. So short-term versus long-term, we'll explain it like this. Have you ever gone on a health journey? Let's say you started keto or you started a new workout routine or whatever it was. Maybe you're training for a triathlon. We need to find ways to have a reward system, right? So in other words, what's your end goal? I really love this Arnold Schwarzenegger quote. You could have the best boat, the best crew, and the best captain in the entire ocean. But if you don't have an end destination, you are just going to float around aimlessly. And personally, I believe the same is true with life. So what am I saying? Ultimately, people say, hey, I have these goals. I want to do this. This is a dream. This is a desire, but they don't ever write it down. And so they don't ever end up achieving it. It's just a dream. So the big factor is for the reward system, right? And pleasure, we have to create a sound end game. What does that look like? Now, it doesn't have to be, hey, I'm 90 years old. It can simply be 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, right? But what does that look like? Not the material goods. What is the lifestyle that you want to live? Because look, we can set all the material goals and accolades in the world that we want.
Right.
Once we get them, we don't feel fulfilled. Why? Because it's not ever about that end game. It's about who we become in the process. So what am I really saying? Again, this is something that can be implemented right away. Write down your goals. What are your lifestyle goals 5 years from now? And then what do? You reverse engineer it, right? Break it down into 3, break it down into 1, break it down into quarterly, break it down into 30-day. I put it to people like this. We are in a country that has taught people to systematically show up and do what they're told. That's what our country does. That's what capitalism is based on, basically.
Right.
And so, we're a child, right? And we start to crawl or walk or do whatever the task is. And mom or dad comes and corrects us. Hey, we do it this way, right? And then we graduate and we go into school. And then we're in school and somebody says, this is a problem. We need to find the solution. Here's how you do it. And then we graduate from school and we go out into the real world and we get our first job. And what do they say? Here's the result we're looking for. Here's how you get to it. Now go and make it happen. Right? So when we can create this system for ourselves, we've already been conditioned to do this our entire lives. So why do we not do it to get results? Right? So again, what is the big picture? And then break it down, and then break it down, and then break it down. And so that reward is in who you become in the process. But again, you can leverage that because when you look at the pain or the pleasure, we want to seek those things and then avoid the things that we don't want about ourselves. And that goes back to this concept of desire and disgust. These are very, very powerful emotions.
What about, well, let me just circle back on that because you touched on something that I tell clients as well is have your vision and make it plain. because people don't want to write things down. They're just carrying it around in their head, whether it's weight loss or obtaining a new certification or degree or starting a podcast or writing a book. You can't just carry it around in your head and talk about it over cocktails. One is you need a plan, a personal business plan for your life. And also, when you have that big picture, which can be daunting, like writing a 50, 70, 100,000 word book, to break it down. I'm so glad you said that, because it has to be bite-sized to be manageable and not be so intimidating. It's how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time, one bite at a time. For desire, now I saw this on your website and I'm interested to know, you say dolphins can teach us about desire. How does that work? What can dolphins teach us? I love dolphins. I just like to see them swim around, but if there's a lesson to be learned, I'm with it. I'm for it.
Absolutely. So two parts on this. I do want to answer your question on the dolphins. I will get to that. Sure. The first part is Michael Lotito, and this is something that you just mentioned. So anybody that's listening to this today can Google this man, Michael Lotito. No longer with us. He is in the Guinness Book of World Records for eating bicycles. That's right. Literally eating a bicycle. Not only has he eaten bicycles, he's eaten a chandelier. He ate a Cessna plane. He ate televisions, all this crazy stuff.
Huh.
You might be saying, well, what the heck does that have to do with this conversation? Well, look, we can't physically eat a bicycle, right? It doesn't fit in our mouths. So how does he do it? He takes the handlebars off. He takes the tires off. He takes the chain off. And then he breaks that into pieces. And then he melts those down into palatable bite-sized pieces and ingests it piece by piece by piece until the whole object is gone.
Oh my. Wow.
That's, you said eating the elephant, right? That's the same concept that we're talking about. But how do I get to that point? Well, number one, you got to know what the elephant or the bicycle looks like. What is the end result? Mm-hmm. And then you break it into these little bite-sized pieces until it's so manageable and consumable that all our responsibility is to do is to show up. The second part,
awesome.
Dolphins. There's a lady named Karen Pryor. You can look her up. She's amazing with dolphins specifically. She's done work with bumblebee tuna, all kinds of other stuff. But she did extensive research on dolphins, and this is why it's relevant to humans. When we look at the animal kingdom, for centuries, it was believed, we have all heard of IQ, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there's something called EQ, okay? EQ is the mass of the body versus the mass of the brain. And when we boil that down, we get a number, okay? So, for example, humans have an EQ of 7.4, right? That's taking the brain and the body mass and boiling that down.
Okay.
When we look at the animal kingdom, out of all the animals out there, the dolphin has the next closest EQ to humans, which is 5.7.
Okay.
So they use this as a mechanism to test reward systems within humans. So here's what they did. They took this massive pool and they put a dolphin into the pool, and they would reward the dolphin with fish, but they wouldn't do it until the 10th jump. The dolphin was expected to perform these jumps, and on the 10th jump, they would reward this dolphin with a fish. Well, what happened? They did this for a long period of time, and the dolphin would only perform on the 10th jump. It would do mediocre efforts. It would barely put energy in, but on that 10th jump, it knew it was getting a reward, so it went all out.
Wow. So the dolphin learned to count.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing.
But the other part of this and how we can leverage this is the lesson was that you had to differentiate the reward system. If you're going through a process, we just talked about breaking those goals down, right? Once you have the goals, I personally like to leverage that material side as rewards once I accomplish the goal. Now, if I set the same reward every single time, it doesn't enthuse me as much the 5th or the 20th time. Mm-hmm. So the lesson here and how we can leverage reward within ourselves to create long-term sustainable habits and patterns is we vary our reward system, right? We don't just wait until the 10th act to then reward ourselves. We don't give ourselves the same thing. We say, hey, look, once I accomplish this, then I can do this or buy this or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But again, this is a mechanism to think about the reward process, vary it up, and enforce getting these results.
Wow. I interview a lot of coaches and hear a lot of different strategies, but that's a new one for me. And I like it. It makes a lot of sense because we get bored when it's just the same thing over and over. It's not exciting. And you are absolutely right. Thanks for sharing that as well. Before we go, you have written a book, Selfish to Selfless, the 5 Pillars to Fulfillment Through Purpose. What are the 5 or some of the pillars, and why should someone read this book?
Thank you so much for this plug. So the 5 pillars are very straightforward, right? It is body, our mindset, our relationships, our spirituality, and our purpose. Okay. So
Okay.
the way that I broke this down, or the reason that I've created this, is because, again, I saw myself in this victim light and I was not getting ahead. I'd see a little bit of success and then fall off, a little bit more success and then fall off. And so what I learned is that this is the true equation to get the results that you want. Now, again, I don't know what people's goals are. So anybody that's reading that book, you construct your own goals, your own equation.
Right.
It's simply plugging into those things, right? So, for example, when I think about the lifestyle that we want to create, that morning routine is our responsibility to fill our cup up so that we can fill other people's cups. And so those categories are your health. You got to contribute to the health, right?
Right.
Sleep, water, diet, exercise. Okay. We talk about personal development. Again, I'm not here to tell anybody how to do their personal development. It's up to you. But those categories would be reading, journaling, seminars, webinars, videos, YouTube University. There's so many resources out there. Podcasts, right? And then spirituality. And again, whatever that means to you, but that's about showing up and contributing to that. So when you focus on these 3 categories in the morning, that ensures that you lead to better relationships, to better conversations. And what does that lead to? A better work environment. And what does that lead to? Higher income and more fulfillment and happiness. And so essentially, that book helps people to create a roadmap for themselves that, again, I show up, I do this because I know what my big picture goal is. I know what I have to do to contribute to that. And it goes back to that thing of purpose, right? And I'll share this story with you and then I'll close out. But we think about, and this story is in the book as well, but I don't know the exact year, it was like 1791, I believe, but there was a big event in Europe. There was a war that occurred and they had this beautiful cathedral and it was completely demolished. And so they have these 3 bricklayers that go out to work on this cathedral. And so when the bricklayers are out there, somebody comes by and he starts to ask what these guys are doing. Now there's 3 of them, right? So one of the bricklayers is on his knees, knelt down, and he's laying this brick. And the guy asks him, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm working so I can make some money." I said, "Okay." He goes to the next guy. The next guy's slightly crouched over, laying his brick. And he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" He says, "Oh, I'm building this wall so I can provide for my family." And he looks at the third guy, and the third guy says, "I am building a cathedral for people to come years after I'm gone." You see, Dr. Mo, all 3 of them were doing the exact same thing, but the perception, the intent was different. That third individual was thinking about how his work contributed to the greater good in other people. And again, that's the element of purpose, right? We are born with gifts. And when we can find a way to leverage our gifts to serve other people, it comes back to us full circle. And that is ultimately how we build fulfillment in life.
Beautiful, beautiful community and connection. I like that. And it sounds like a wonderful book. It is on my reading list. All of my guests lately have been phenomenal authors. So I've got a wonderful list of books for my own personal growth and development. I really appreciate your time and talents here today. Before we sign off, just tell folks how they can order your book and connect with you online to learn more.
Yeah, thank you so much. So it's on Amazon. You can check it out. And in fact, Actually, we are in the process of completing. This is one of a 3-part series. So those other 2 will be out soon. People can find the website. It's very simple, www.ckc.coach. And I love having conversations with people. So anybody can reach out at any time. I'm an open book.
Sweet, sweet. And you've seen today that he is indeed an open and very wise, resourceful book. And speaking of books, if you want to know more about my work, my books and services, I'm gonna do a little plug for myself before I go. Connect with me at drmoanderson.com. I'm going to show up, Coach Keeg, next week, and I hope the listeners will join me here on Perpetual Motion with Dr. Mo Anderson. Thank you.
Dr. Mo, thank you so much.